lower them to 31%, and or they're not working, and that causes a big problem because you can't make mortgage payments when you aren't working. So they've now come up with something. They now are going to start a new program which says basically this. They're going to send out people to the banks. They're going to send out these little squads out there, and they're going to be watching the numbers, and basically they're going to make public which banks are loaning and which banks aren't, so everybody knows. They're also doing something with short sales. Let me talk about that. They're starting a new program now that if you're a bank and you agree to a short sale, they're going to give you $1,000 to do it. If you're basically the seller, they're going to give you $1,500, and if you're a second, they'll just write you a check for $5,000 if you'll go along with the short sale. So that may help with short sales. There is one company out there that's very good with short sales, so let me tell you who that is. Wachovia, World Savings, or Golden West. Now let me tell you why that is. When Wells Fargo bought Wachovia, they did not take over their portfolio of all the subprime loans that basically were Golden West or World Savings. So they kept those. So that's in a separate company under the Wachovia brand still, which means that they own those loans. So they can get to them quickly, they can make a decision. They're doing them in about 48 days. A lot of times you go into Bank of America, which is the worst, or Citibank, and they don't even own the loan. It's sitting God only knows where, someplace around the Middle East. And so therefore you got to deal with everybody. So if you see a short sale with Wachovia, Golden West, and World Savings, you can get right to their 800 number and get down to the local people. They have people locally that will get out there, start the process for you day one. So that maybe will ease up a little bit with short sales, okay? Now, let me talk a little bit about some of the guidelines that are coming down, because obviously, you know they passed the new First-Time Homeowners Act, all right? There's 3 dates to remember, all right? The first one is, the old rule was that it was going to go out of existence November the 30th, but the President signed the extension on November the 6th. So it goes back, the new law, under November the 6th. So the extension starts on November the 6th. People that bought from November 6th forward will not go under the old one. They'll go under the new one. And here's the dates you need to remember. November 6th, April the 1st, and it has to be within contract by April, all right? And then it has to be done, closed, done by the end of June. So those are the 3 dates you need to remember. November the 6th, April, and June the 30th. Those are the extensions. It was a 5-month extension, all right? Here's the way it works for first-time home buyers. You're either never owned a home, or you have but haven't in the last 3 years. There's a cap now on the dollar amount. It's $800,000. It can't be more than that. It has to be principal residence, owner-occupied. You have to be willing to live in that property for 3 years, and they've raised the income level now. So basically you can qualify up to $125,000 if you're single, or up to $250,000 if you're married. So that's the first time. They also did something for repeat buyers now. So if you're a repeat buyer, here's the way it works. Now under the first-time buyer, you get $8,000 or 10%, whichever's greater. That's what you get as the credit. Under the repeat buyer, it has to be a principal residence, owner-occupied. You have to prove that you've lived there 5 out of the last 8 years. You don't have to even sell that property. You can actually leave it and rent it, as long as the new one that you buy is going to be your principal residence. But the one you're leaving, you have to have shown it was your principal residence 5 out of the last 8 years. You will get a $6,500 credit, or 10% of the value, whichever is greater. Again, there's a cap of $800,000, and the new income caps are $125,000 if you're single, or $250,000 if you're married. There's also something nice that they've done too. Even if you buy a property in the year of 2010, they will allow you to take the credit against your 2009 income tax returns. And the way you do that, if it's after April 15, you go in and you amend your tax return with your accountant. If you haven't done it yet, and you haven't, it's before April 15, what you want to do is you want to go on extension and get an extended income tax return form that allows you to wait till October so that you can put it on your 2009 taxes. So anybody buying from January through that end date of June, basically you can still get the credit in 2009. So that's the first-time buyers and the repeat buyers credit that basically came out there. All right, now, there's been some changes to FHA, all right, and these are biggies, all right. FHA, you know, doesn't really have any credit requirements for FICO scores, but what we're hearing is the lenders now are saying this. Bare minimum that FHA is looking at is probably 640. Refis, they're probably looking at 660 to 680. Wells Fargo now working with FHA is basically saying the debt to service ratio that they're going to show is going to be 45%. That's it. It's not going to be 50 or 55%. And if you've done any pre-approvals for an FHA, you probably are going to have to go back in the next month or two and basically get them again because they've changed some of the things that they're doing. So let me talk some of the things that they've done. And this applies now to just condominiums under FHA. And part of this has happened because FHA has basically quadrupled the number of loans they've done. You know, they're the big lender out there now. And their reserves against their portfolio used to be about 6%. It's now down to less than 0.5%. And the government mandate, they said, says that it has to be at 2%. So they're changing some of the underwritings, especially with condominiums, because that's where a lot of the concentration of their loans are. So, number one, probably anything you got that's been pre-approved on a condominium project through FHA that you got from the 10-1, probably October, you might have to go back and reapply because it might not come through as approved because they're doing a new system. The second thing is, you know they used to have these spot approvals you could get? No more spot approvals now. Everything has to go through the regular system and you have to go get the general, regular, all approved process. If you have a condominium project right now and more than 30% of that condominium has FHA loans, you're probably not going to get an FHA loan for your buyer on that project. Also, they are demanding certain things. So here's what I'm going to tell you you need to do. Don't think these FHA loans are going to go through in 40, 45 days. It's probably going to take 90 days because they're requiring all kinds of information now. What you can do to help that process, if you have clients and you're showing them condominiums, get in there and get all this stuff in advance, and you want it anyway because you want to be able to know whether your seller or your buyer is going to be able to get a loan or you're going to have problems with that project. They go in, they love a unit, then you can't get them a loan, now you're in trouble. Because here's what they're demanding. They're also demanding, number one, from the HOA, proof of insurance. So they want to actually see the policy. So they're going to want fire hazard liability. They also want a reserve study. And in California, condominium projects have to do that every 3 years. They want to see those reserve study now. They also want to know from the HOA whether there's any lawsuits pending against the condominiums and or against the board of directors. So they're asking now specifically for all that information, and they want it in their hand to look at the loan. The other thing that obviously they've done is they've also said now, you know, that they want basically 70% of a project sold. If it's new construction, they want 50% pre-sold. They don't want more than 15% of homeowners' dues in arrears, and they don't want more than 25% of the homeowner's rentals versus home ownership. So they're kind of doing all these things. They're going to the appraisal process now that Fannie and Freddie are under, which means you're not going to get that 5 or 6 months. They're going to that 3 to 4 month, and then you have to go back and get another one. So that's sort of all that's out there with FHA. So that's getting a little bit tighter that we know of. Now, Fannie and Freddie are going under a new underwriting system in December, on December the 12th, all right? So let me just tell you what they're doing, okay? Because these people, you know, it's every day they do something. I mean, God forbid they should basically just make loans and shut up. But of course, they have to go out there and wreck the world out there. First of all, the maximum allowable total expense ratio will be 45% on Fannie and Freddie loans starting December the 12th. The second thing is, and this is important, you used to give them credit documents, and they used to be good for 120 days. Now they're only going to be good for 90 days. And after that, you're going to have to go back and resubmit them again. And the two things that Fannie and Freddie have required of us is, you know, they usually require proof of funds for deposit, down payment, and reserves. If you're using now a CD or you're using a stock brokerage account or mutual fund account, they used to give us 100% of that valuation in order to determine whether you had enough funds. They're now only going to allow 70% of the value of those for basically against the down payment and reserves. And if you're using retirement funds, they used to allow us 70%. Now they're only going to give us 60%. So I think that's everything I know out there that's basically changing under the new rules out there. Okay, let me go through some statistics now, because I think that Tom told you a little bit about some that came out, which was sales pending, which was great. Inventory now, when you look at national sales, we have a sales price of about $173,000. Inventory's at about 7 months, which is good, because at one time we were as high, you know, as 12, 13 months. First-time buyers now make up about 33% of the market. The other big outflow of who makes up the market, if you're looking at who makes up the organic mixture, is a lot of investors that are buying foreclosures and short sales. What we've lost or on delay a lot of are that organic move up, move around buyer. That's because that market is a little bit slower that you know of.